On today, Jake Coyne joins the show with Ryan Blackburn and myself. We're going to talk about the Denver Nuggets offseason, the ins and outs. He laid out one of his annual just deep dives into the Denver Nuggets offseason, from the money, the CBA, the possibilities, and weird things went wrong. We're going to have a very thorough discussion about this team, what the Nuggets can do to rewrite the story of the last 2 years to put themselves back in title contention. Yo, we got Jake, we got Ryan, we got Swiper. Y'all know what time it is. It's Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? You're welcome to Locked On Nuggets. This is your daily Denver Nuggets basketball show on Locked On, y'all. Thank y'all so much for being here. Cannot wait to get into this discussion, y'all. When I tell y'all that we have an incredible episode coming up for you, this is going to be one of your favorite of the all season, y'all. We got Jake, we got Ryan. Yo, this is going to be a great show. I can't wait. You know, Jake, I have been a big fan of yours for some time now. I've read every single one of your yearly pieces you put out, the information you put out about the team, whether it becomes the stats or whether it comes to the money about the team. Truly, you are one of one inside of the Colorado market talking about this Denver Nuggets team. You're the best at what you do. So thank you so much for joining the show today.
Of course. I mean, you're too kind. I'm, really excited to be here. Locked On Nuggets, probably one of the longest running Nuggets shows I've ever listened to. And you guys have a great dynamic, and Matt does too. So happy to be here.
I appreciate that. Ryan, brother, how are you doing today, bro?
I'm doing well. It's been an interesting offseason, kind of transitioning into this thing after Denver loses in 7 in the second round again. Always at this point, you're trying to look for solutions. You're trying to look for answers, how to pivot, how to change. And yet a lot of the messaging is that they're going to stay the same with internal development. So here's hoping with Jake that they can find a way to change that.
Absolutely. So we're going to get straight into it, y'all. So Jake, we've had a chance now to kind of sit on this great document that you dropped on May 26th for a little bit now. And just talking about basically the overall season for the Denver Nuggets and just what exactly happened and just how they got here. And in your offseason preview, you talked a lot about the things that kind of led up to this moment, really where the CBA and how that affected where the Nuggets were based on where the front office and the decision-making that were made, the contracts that were signed prior to the CBA. So for you, when you kind of just started doing the groundwork to talk about what happened in the last 2 years in the Calvin Booth era with Michael Malone that led to some of the things that kind of hard capped this team, both financially and with the roster, where do you think the story begins for kind of the downfall for where the team is right now?
Yeah, so I originally kind of started on this the week that those firings got announced. And, I think you look at it and you say a team always has a direction. The Suns have a really unique direction with what they're doing. And the Nuggets decided to take this route of going young, despite them already being a good team, which makes things a little interesting in the draft. And I kind of looked at that direction and I said, okay, well, considering this is the way they wanted to go, what did they do right? What did they do wrong along the way? And, I identify a bunch of different things in that piece, but I would say some of the main things that it boils down to from a front office perspective would be just kind of the tightrope you're walking when you're drafting in the mid to late 20s every year, which is what you're doing with Jokic on the team. Just that tightrope, but you have to get everything right when you're doing it that way. Your first round picks, they need to be contributing almost right away, if not by year 2 at the latest. And we didn't really see that. Peyton Watson was a borderline playoff guy last year in his second year. I think you can say Strother was a little similar this year. And so it seems like things just weren't progressing as quick as they needed to for how much you were kind of bleeding talent on the veteran side. The young guys weren't able to pick it up as quickly. And I think you can get into a lot of theories of why that was the case. And, was it talent? Was it coaching? You'll probably get 10 different answers if you ask 10 different people. But I would say that was the main issue, was they walked this really tight rope of this strategy and they had to get so much right. There was so little room for error, and I just don't think they got enough right.
Jake, overall, it feels like Denver has bled talent a little bit over the course of these past couple of years. You lose KCP, you lose Bruce Brown in 2 successive years, and they haven't done a great job of replacing them. And they've honestly gone the other way by spending as many resources as they have in order to, I guess, maximize the current group of young guys, but I don't feel like they've actually done that. Would you agree with that sentiment and just the way that Calvin Booth sort of set this thing up, trying to maximize this current group? They don't have any more assets that they can throw out there to really pivot that much. Do you agree with that sentiment at all?
Yeah, I think I do agree with that because, the way that they kind of bled talent and bled assets, it sort of molded the roster in a way that if you had a weak point, it was really hard to address. So, for example, I think the Nuggets wish they had another shooter, and I think they wish they had another guy that could score off the dribble. But when you put so many assets into getting these young guys, and none of them have that skill set really. Strother's ideally a shooter, but he's been a little up and down so far. And then in addition to that, you also let veterans walk, so you don't have a lot of salaries you can use in trade. The Nuggets salary situation is very top heavy, very bottom heavy, and it doesn't leave a lot of flexibility. And so it makes it hard to maximize your roster, like you said, Ryan, because you don't have the way to get these support pieces in there to maximize the players you do have. And I think that was one thing that this team really struggled with is, Coach Malone would always play the starters together, and he had this pretty consistent rotation. And it was really hard to kind of put guys in a place to succeed on that bench unit because you were so limited with the guys that you had. And part of that is just because, you put your assets into getting those guys and not leaving any space for exterior improvement, I guess.
One of the things that, Ron and I have talked about for some time now, and you noted this especially, there's this hubris that developed, it seems like, with the Denver Nuggets front office and Calvin Booth. And when they hit on the Christian Brown but draft, I think in some ways that was confirmation bias that, like, hey, we have this plan where we're going to draft where we are in the 20s, and we're basically just going to get the best talent available to us at that time. We're going to go young. We're going to work around the CBA with young, cheap contracts and have wings on the roster that we're developing: Julian Strawther, Peyton Watson, Hunter Tyson, and then obviously Christian Brown. But then when you look at Christian was such a hit that even his rookie year, when he was the Nuggets' 8th man, he gave them such invaluable minutes. For in their mind, they're like, well, let's just run it back. Peyton will be there next year. He'll have a full year under his belt, another year in the second year. He'll be there. He'll be the next rotation player for this team. But they drafted Peyton at 30? And they drafted Julian Strawther at 29. They drafted Jalen Pickett at 32. They drafted Hunter Tyson, I think, at 37. So if you look over the last couple of years, how they have formulated this roster, Ryan, I've talked a lot about this with you. If you're going to go young with the CBA, Ryan, I said they need to get in the lottery. Like, you can't do this and then just make gambles that, hey, Rudy Gobert's going to be there again at 27. Pascal Siakam, Jimmy Butler, they're going to find them at the end of the first round like all those teams did over the course of a decade through the draft. And that is going to be the thing that holds serve. You're going to find players to be able to play good, consistent minutes in year 1, more in year 2, more in year 3, and they're ready to rock in year 4. And here we are, Jake. Here we are, Ryan. We're headed to year 4 of Peyton Watson and Christian Brown. And right now, Christian Brown is the only one that's fully developed into a consistently playable player no matter the situation. And Peyton Watson, I think he can get there. I think there are paths for him. But we've seen the offensive limitations that he has. They've been very strong thus far. So, Jake, it seems that they had the right idea. We're going to go young. We're going to have cheap, available contracts. That way we can build our roster from the inside out. But one of your criticisms was, but you're doing that, taking chances at the end of the draft when the talent that you actually need, you're more going to find that they're closer to the top than you are to the bottom.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, by all accounts, Calvin Booth is a very good scout of college talent. And, like you said, I think they hit on Christian Brown right away, and maybe it gave them a little bit of false confidence. Because the reality is, and I note it in my report, is that you could have the best scouting department in the league. You're not going to hit 100% of your picks. And that becomes a problem, especially in the late first round, because when you do hit on a late first round pick, it's usually not like an all-star player or something, right? Like it is a Christian Brown type player, a good player, obviously, but your hits, when they're so few and far in between, they need to be really impactful hits. And yeah, it's exactly what you said. I put one chart in that report that's kind of these teams that have 6 or more rookie scale contracts. So either a first round or the second round rookie exception that's new under this CBA. And Denver, when you compare them to these teams, there's just really no comparison. I mean, they don't have any top 20 picks among those 6. All the other teams do. Most of the other teams have lottery picks, and I think most of them even have top 5 picks. And so you're just talking about so little room for error. And I think it's exactly what you said, Swipe. It's just really hard to kind of land the talent you need to by taking that path.
Let me ask you this really quick before we hit a break. Do you think the Nuggets have enough talent to justify running it back and saying that we are a genuine contender next season?
Not just running it back as is. So like if Westbrook opts in and, you bring in some minimum guys, I don't think that's enough. I think you can start to make an argument if you say Deron Holmes is going to be a rotation player and you say we're going to get a guy on the MLE who's going to contribute in the playoffs, like a Bruce Brown or any number of guys. If you can say those 2 guys are getting added into a regular season rotation for sure and hopefully playoffs, I think you can make the argument. I personally wouldn't make that argument. I would say there's probably still a shortfall there. But I think there's at least an argument, a credible one that you could make. So.
And on the other side, we're going to talk about how can the Nuggets right the ship, because you do talk about some options that are available to them. And I think, the fan base loves getting in the trade talks as well. So there's going to be a lot of great options. And Ryan, y'all, he's worked up some magic. Expect some all-time great 2K level trade proposals from Ryan Blackburn. He never disappoints y'all. This is going to be a great, great segment. We'll be right back for more here on Locked On Nuggets. The days are getting longer, the weather's warming up, and people are spending more time outside, which means it's the perfect time to refresh your outdoor space. Whether you're working with a big backyard or a small balcony, WayFair has everything you need to make it feel more like you. WayFair's massive selection of outdoor essentials makes it easy to transform any space into your ideal summer setup. From comfy conversation sets to sleek dining tables and outdoor decor, they've got it all at prices that fit your budget. Now, you need a new patio dining set and some string lights from WayFair? Hey, great. It's all available. I love mixing my styles in the way that I live. I love comfortable, but I want a modern look with modern taste, and WayFair helps you to do it. And on top of that, delivery is free, hassle-free, even for the big stuff. So whether you're entertaining guests or just relaxing solo, shop WayFair to help you unwind. So shop a huge selection of outdoor furniture online this summer. Get out with WayFair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WayFair.com. WayFair, every style, every home. We'll be right back for more here, Locked On Nuggets. We are back here for segment 2 of Locked On Nuggets. We're here with Jake Coyne himself, the man, the myth, the legend, with the great in-depth offseason information about the Denver Nuggets. We're here with Ryan Blackburn, a.k.a. Brian Chartburn, a.k.a. David Adelman's new right-hand numbers man in the Denver media. Y'all, so make sure if you're listening to this on Apple, iTunes, and Spotify, give us a 5-star review. That way more and more people can listen to the great content here made at Locked On Nuggets. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you said, who are those 3 great-looking gentlemen on the YouTube? Give us a like. share, and subscribe. That way we can get to 15,000 subscribers, which is our next goal, y'all. So now it's time for the hope. Now it's time for the positivity. We have an array of positive folks up here. So, Jake, when you think about how the Denver Nuggets can kind of right the wrongs of what they've done the last 2 years and kind of fix the situation they're in with their roster, maybe even addressing some of their talent issues, where would you start? What are some of the first things that you would do to address those issues?
Yeah, so I think you probably start with the gimme, which is the free thing, which is that taxpayer mid-level exception, which they should have. I think to start righting some of those wrongs, you have to get it right this year with that exception. You've used it the last 2 years on Reggie Jackson and Dario Saric. And if you dig deeper, you had to use 3 second-round picks to get off that Reggie deal. So it's just like you have to get that exception right this year. I mean, you could make an argument to me about whatever position you might need to sign with it. I'm open to all arguments, but whoever it is, it needs to be somebody that's going to play for you in the playoffs. And hopefully they're able to do that. From there, I would probably say you need to bring in at least one more rotation piece. And there's a number of ways you could do it. You could send out one and get 2 back. You could just send out maybe like a Zeke and a pick and get 1 back. So there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. But I think at the end of the day, you need to see the team bring in at least 2 new rotation guys, 1 probably with the MLE and 1 via trade, I think, unless you're able to land some really great player with a minimum contract.
Let me clarify for you. The Zeke and a pick is literally a single solitary pick that they have left. They have one. They have 1 pick that they can trade. It's in the 2031 first round pick, which, I mean, if you're an opposing team, it's a viable option. It's a viable thing for a team that has Jokic that's already turned 30 in 2025. What's it going to look like when he's 36? I think is a fair question, and whether he's going to be here or not. So if you can throw a lot of different things and with that particular pack, with like that particular pick at a team. So I kind of hesitate to throw Zeke Naji in with something like that, because are you just trying to upgrade at the 7th man? Are you just trying to upgrade 7th or 8th? Is that justifiable for spending your last remaining draft asset?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think it would depend on the guy coming back. Like Zeke and a first round pick for Ayo Dosunmu, right? I think there's people that would consider that even
in this call.
But yeah, I mean, like you said, that 2031 pick, it isn't nothing. I think it's a pretty good pick. It's not like a blue chip asset, it's not some great pick, but I think it's a good one. And then starting in July, they'll also have those 2032 picks available, which they can't trade 2031 and 2032, but they could trade either. And then they'll also get that 2nd round pick in 2032 that they'll have access to. So pretty limited there. And like you said, it's a big risk, I think, trading them, but you might have to do it. So we'll see.
Him is in the comments, by the way, says, Ryan, you could trade that 2031 for multiple picks, kind of like what Phoenix and Utah did. Jake actually outlined that in his manifesto. And I think it's a pretty salient point, the way that they could. I think one of the things that they should be trying to do is find a 2027 first that they can acquire and find a 2029 first that they could acquire. I don't care how they do it, but if you can do that, you could honestly trade your other picks in 2028, 2030, and 2032 this offseason and put together an actually really interesting package for one of these guys. Because of the Stepien rule, you have to at least have some pick in those years in order to make it happen. So there's a lot of ways that I think they can get very creative. Let me throw one other thing your way. I am of the opinion that the only way that Denver can make real tangible change is if they trade one of their core 4. Because of the way the salaries are impacting things, because they have so small salaries, Zeke Naji is not going to change anything with their group. Like just trading his salary, he's only going to make $7.5 million. That's not going to be anything significant outside of maybe 1 or 2 possibilities. I kind of think they have to trade one of Jamal or Mike. And you've outlined that in your proposals as well. Tell the audience why you think that might be the case.
Yeah, so I mean, the first point, which you pointed out, Ryan, is that the salaries of some of your younger guys that do have some trade value, like Christian Brown, I mean, we're talking a little under $5 million, and that's just not really going to get you much out on the trade market. And with Denver's salary situation, they can't take in more money than they send out. And so it gets pretty complicated there trying to make an upgrade with little salaries. And so I agree with you. If they're going to make significant change, I think it's going to have to be Mike, or it's going to have to be Jamal. Throw some other pieces in there probably, and hopefully get an upgrade. But I don't think it's a guarantee. You might have to take some risk with whoever you're getting back. And to be honest, I think Jamal and Mike, partly due to their contracts and partly due to performance, I don't think they make sense like for every team in the NBA. I think there's a handful of teams that would take Jamal, and I think there's a handful of teams that would take Mike. And so you're really looking at like a really narrowed down pool of teams you can make a deal with. And so, it gets pretty complicated there, but I'm totally with you. If they're going to make a significant change this offseason and either upgrade or just kind of make things look entirely different, and hopefully it's an upgrade, I think it'll come at the expense of one of those two guys.
On the other side, we're going to finish up this conversation about the trade options for the Nuggets. There's one in particular I want to ask you about that I think might actually end up working out in some ways. Ryan also will have some available. And then also, we're going to answer the question, is this the biggest summer of the KSE era? We'll be right back for more here. Locked On Nuggets. We are back here for the final segment of Locked On Nuggets. We have the friend of the show, Jay Coyne, Sasquatch himself on Twitter, is joining us with the show today. Ryan Blackburn, the man, the myth, the legend himself, great content creator in the Denver Nuggets area, and then just little old me. Y'all, we're having a great conversation today. Now, Jake, I'll tell you what, because of the nature of the NBA, and in particular because of the CBA, you're looking to get off of bad contracts in this league. You're also looking, how can you shorten the amount of time that you're paying out for a bad contract? And you're also willing to take back a larger contract for a better player, also on a shorter term. And there's one trade in particular that you proposed that I absolutely talked to Ryan Blackburn about. And that was the Chicago Bulls deal that you put out. And if there was a trade that I think actually makes sense for both teams, Patrick Williams, Kevin Huerter, Ayo Dosunmu, Michael Porter Jr., Zeke Naji, and that first-round pick, that actually makes sense for getting more to Chicago. They have a first-round pick that they can play with that's probably by then going to be a top 10-ish pick. And then on top of that, you get Michael Porter, who has a shorter contract than Patrick Williams, but again, more money initially, especially in the next 2 years. But you can pair him ostensibly with Josh Giddey, with Lonzo Ball, with the rest of the roster, and Matas especially, and give them another off-ball shooter and give them more size as well. Denver gets back a player that's a better defender, but again, not as good as MPJ, but you get Ayo back, who I think is going to be a playoff-level, championship-level guard for some team at some point. You get Kevin Huerter, you get shooting back, and again, not the best contract of all time, but a player that can be a rotation player. And Jake, Ryan, I actually think that if there was a deal out there for Porter that makes the most sense, that's probably the one, due to all the extenuating circumstances surrounding it.
I can fix Patrick Williams, Jake. I can fix him. It's fine. He can start here. He'll be okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's what everybody would tell themselves, right? With these 4 years and $72 million, I think he has left going forward. Yeah, I mean, like, I really do try and dig in with all these deals I put in this report, try and make them make sense for both teams. Looking at this one in particular, one of my things I was thinking about was Nickeil Alexander-Walker. If people remember earlier in his career, he wasn't who he is now. And he kind of was a throw-in for a couple trades. And I was kind of thinking about, who could be like the next guy that ends up sort of like that. Now, to be fair, Io is already a better player than Nikhil was at the time of him being thrown into trades like that. So it's not really quite the same, but I think Io is a clear example of a guy you could bring in, and he could just really elevate his game, especially if he's playing some minutes next to Jokic. And I think the same of Kevin Herter, more of a proven shooter than like a Julian Strother is. I think you could put him in a lineup next to either Pickett or Westbrook or whoever you might have. And he's really going to help you space things out. And I think carry some more of those bench units.
I like it. I think it's a good move. It's an interesting move. The idea, of course, being you give up one rotation player and one guy who hasn't been able to make it into the rotation in Zeke Naji, and you get back three. You get back three possible guys that you could throw in there, depending on what you think of Patrick Williams. Another one that I would consider for Jamal Murray. There's a couple of you're talking about a handful of teams that you think might be interested in acquiring a guy like that. When I think of that kind of deal, I think of teams that struggle offensively to score, that struggle in the playoffs, that could need a little bit of a jolt, somebody who's been in those situations before. I think of Houston, I think of Toronto, I think of Orlando. And Toronto is one that actually has cropped up for me recently that I think is very interesting. With them getting Brandon Ingram, I think they're going to give up RJ Barrett, and they might do it in a very interesting way. Can you manage a Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett for Jamal Murray and salary deal and get two quality starting rotation players for one?
Yeah, that's a good question. Quickley is a guy that I highlighted in the report. Not as good of a player as Jamal Murray, clearly. But I think you'd hope that you can sort of raise his ceiling next to Jokic. Barrett's an interesting one. Out of curiosity, how would you play him here? Would you start Porter, Gordon?
I think there's a world where that is the move to beget the other move, where Michael Porter then gets broken up into a couple of different bench pieces, and you start Quickley, Brown, and Barrett, and then have a bench that is a little bit more fulfilling.
Yeah, I think it's a doable deal. Barrett is someone that I kind of played around in the trade machine with a little, and going to Denver. I do have another deal in there where he's going to Washington, but I did look at him coming to Denver as well. I think he'd be a good player in Denver. I think they could bring the best out of him. My concern in that lineup specifically would just be spacing and shooting. If you had a KCP, for example, instead of a Christian Brown, I might feel a little bit better about it. But I think the spacing there could get a little funky. But it would be an interesting experiment because Barrett can definitely create off the dribble more than Porter can. Gordon can do it a little bit, and then Quickley can do it really well. And so you kind of have three creators there in addition to Jokic. And so I think that's a new dynamic that would be interesting for sure.
Yeah, and then you also had one that I thought was interesting, the Emmanuel Quickley, Ochai Agbaji, and then Marcus Smart end up in Denver, and then that's where Denver gives up Jamal Murray and Zeke Naji and Julian Strother, RJ Barrett, and Dario. They head to Washington, and that kind of, I think that makes sense for Washington, getting a young asset kind of to get in the room with a bunch of kids. That's kind of in the middle of his young career right now. Again, that might be about, like I said, y'all, like people think that Jake think, the Nuggets need their Caruso-Giddey deal. I'm not of the mind at all that that's what's going to happen. I think I'm very conscious of what the value is for these players, but I also know there are other teams that have bad contracts that are trying to get off of what they believe to be a bad contract, and there are pathways. And you brought up a Zach LaVine drill deal that's in there. I thought the John Collins Sexton one for Michael Porter Jr., Dario, Hunter Tyson, and the 31 pick. That also is something that makes sense. Again, John Collins does not have a lot of value in the league. He doesn't even have a lot of value for Utah, but he also is a good player. And then on top of that, if you're able to add another player with John like Colin Sexton, and you give the Denver Nuggets more vertical explosion than they've had in years. And I think that also matters for the team. But to your point, Jake, I think objectively the team, they have to make adjustments to address how explosive they are. They have to get players that can beat you off the dribble, which is what they were in 23 when you had Jamal, you had Bruce, you had KCP, you had Brown, and Porter was even doing it at a time, plus Jokic, plus Gordon. They just had so many different options, and I think they limited their options over the last couple of years. And, Ryan knows I've talked about this plenty. In this league, you got to have 4 or 5 people that can beat you off the dribble, at least make you think. And that's what OKC have. That's what the Celtics have. That's what even, obviously, the Pacers have, like in galore. And I think the Nuggets, they have gone away from that, and they struggle to get the ball up the court if it's not Russ or if it's not Murray. But then we even saw with Russ, Ryan, because of the hand injury, he just couldn't hold on to the ball as the playoffs went on, like, period. It got ripped all the time. Yeah. But again, that was just more so because of injury. You need another player outside of Pickett you could trust. So they've lacked options. Now, the fantasy land deal, Jake, here is the Michael Porter Jr., Christian Brown, DeRon Holmes, 31 pick for Zion. Again, if I'm the Nuggets, this is the thing. The league now is not about what makes sense to everybody else. It has to make sense to one person. And I think the Nuggets need to be that team that's making calls to everybody, trying to figure out who is the player that they can actually acquire that can help make the difference. But to ask this question, and this will be our last ending point here, Jake, and then Ryan, go after that, please. Do you think this is the most important summer of the KSE era with the Nuggets?
I mean, yeah, I think without a doubt it is. You think about all the decisions that have been made or need to be made this summer. You're talking about coaching, front office, and you're really at an inflection point with a lot of these guys on the roster that won you a championship before. So I think without a doubt, it's the biggest summer. Personally, I'd probably even be a little bit disappointed if they just sort of run it back, maybe trade into the draft for a second round pick or a late first and kind of buckle down on this strategy they've already taken. So I think it is a big, big summer. And I'm hoping that they really look at this with a fresh set of eyes and determine where they can get better.
Yeah, I would firmly agree. I do not, I'm on record on this, on saying this. A lot of people have been pretty critical of me laying out the plan of what the Nuggets are really trying to state. And like, we'll see whether that changes with the new GM that they end up getting. We think it's potentially Matt Lloyd of Minnesota. I think that it would be a mistake to run it back. I think that the only reason that the Nuggets are framing it that way is because they have so few assets. It's because there's no optionality to actually be able to change anything. And they know that if they call about Jamal Murray, if they call about Michael Porter, that they're going to be met with pretty dead phone lines for much of that. And that's going to be a problem if you continue to like put those guys into trade rumors and then nothing ends up manifesting, then you might ruin the chemistry of the team. So they have to know when they're actually going to get this done and how they can go about it and who's the right guy and whether they're going to have relationships enough to build this thing correctly. But I just tend to think that if they screw this up, like there is a method to the madness of waiting a little bit, because if you do wait until Michael Porter is an expiring contract, if you wait until the 2026 draft, you can trade him along with a 2026 draft pick, a 2031 draft pick, and a whole bunch of swaps, and really put yourself into a position where you've got a lot of valuable commodities coming back. But can you wait? Do you have the timing to be able to wait? I think is a fair question with Nikola Jokic being age 30.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think that Jokic being 30 is they're on the clock. The Crockies are on the clock. I do think there is a pathway, though. I don't even think you need a crazy swing, but you got to get the bench right. You got to get veterans on the roster. You got to get the MLE right this year. It can't be a repeat of Dario Saric. All due respect to him, can't be a repeat of Reggie Jackson. It just cannot be. You need a younger, more player that's more talented. You have to find a way to get somebody that can give you valuable contribution. What you can't do is go into the playoffs with your sixth man being a 36-year-old who'll be 37 next year, hoping that will be enough, plus a bunch of young guys. But we'll see on the other side. Jake, this has been a great episode. We really appreciate you being here today. You do excellent work. Again, I think everybody on the Locked On Network And the Nugget side is huge fans of yours. The chat is a huge fan of yours. The audience loves your work. So we really appreciate you being here today, Jake, and you made this an amazing episode.
Well, yeah, thank you guys for having me on, and thanks to everybody in the chat for all the support. Appreciate it.
Well, y'all know what time it is. Yeah, there you go. Locked On Nuggets, y'all. Make sure y'all like, share, and subscribe. We will be back here with another episode tomorrow. That's Ryan. That's Jake. This is Swiper. Y'all know what time it is. See you on the other side.